So I have a super short but fascinating video topic that I wanted to explore. On the topic of real ones, how do you spot somebody that is quote unquote real in today's day and age? Because we gotta admit there's a lot of saturation in the world, not just in terms of people's diversity, but also in the availability and accessibility of certain things, products, indulgences, things that you can consume. It is quite difficult to spot things that are genuinely beneficial to you and things that seem like it on the surface but are actually not on a deeper level. And I just wanted to give kind of a few principles that you can use to try to detect that genuinity amongst all of the kind of false personas and mimicry that exists. Because honestly, it can be quite difficult to see through. So here we go. Number one tip is to read people's body language. I would say the number one thing that you can do to really quickly find out somebody's intentions is to look at the way that they're moving their body as they speak. And it's not just their hands. Obviously people can move their hands to convey some information, but check their eyes, check their eyebrows, check their lips. There's so many subtle things that people do, especially when they're dishonest. Maybe they'll kind of look away. Maybe they'll kind of twitch. They might even mirror somebody else's body language. None of these necessarily mean that somebody's lying, but there are some cues that are more pronounced than others that can kind of give an indication of what somebody's feeling or what they're actually thinking. So you should look for consistency with the body language and the voice, the tone, the inflection. These are important things. You can probably get this information as well from watching police interrogations. It's not like that's something incredibly revelational. It's just you pick up on those little things as you have more interactions and as you observe more things. But you have to be aware. If you're not somebody who's typically aware, those little things might fly under the rug. So it does take a little bit of practice, it does take experience, but what you're looking for is those little things that most people miss, Even look for somebody's hand as they scratch or move their hair out of the way, if they make intense eye contact or lack of, These are all little things, It's difficult to just flat out say what each cue means. And I honestly would like to do some videos in the future, kind of investigating them and trying to come up with a bit of a more grounded perspective on that. But this is just a general method you can use to kind of validate your initial impressions as you try to form a judgment. And speaking of judgments, that's kind of the second tip is you gotta use some level of intuition to really gauge the credibility and really overall positive intentions of somebody. When you're talking to a close friend, you kind of have a rapport, you have a relationship there. It's much easier to see what that person's feeling and thinking because of your experience with them. You've seen them at their worst, or maybe at their not so best, and you've been able to kind of understand how they move in certain aspects when they are not feeling well, or when they're being deceptive, and all these different traits that can be expressed. And I think from those relationships, you can kind of use those as a platform to analyze others, you know? And yeah, again, this also takes practice, but you're kind of using this intrinsic gut feeling to kind of evaluate who it is you're talking to. What do they really want under the surface? And, you know, are they being honest with whatever they're characterizing themselves to be? And yeah, that's kind of the gist of that point. Okay, and I'm kind of like multitasking here, so I made some cuts just because I had to work at the same time. But so yeah, those are kind of the first two initial tips that come to mind. You know, when you're kind of moving through life, you're trying to read people and just generally understand intentions. Yeah, so the first one, like I said, is mainly a strategic thing that you can employ to read body language. The second one is to kind of analyze them from a more altruistic standpoint, because you're trying to gauge if this person is genuine at heart. I would say the third is kind of a practical way of analyzing it. This is where you look at somebody's history, you know? You kind of look at their actions, you look at what they're doing, what they're contributing, what they say versus what they actually accomplish, you know, what they say versus what they actually finish. There are a lot of things that people talk about doing, they say they believe in, but when you match up the actions to their words, they don't align. And that's kind of the ultimate step with being able to read these things from people, because you have the vision of not just the intuition, not just the observational component, but you were able to like logically analyze, you know, somebody's history to say that, like, okay, based on what this person has done, how likely are they to actually be truthful and act on their word, you know, in the future. And this applies to so many fields. You know, it applies to sports, it applies to politics, it even applies to spirituality, because, you know, that's where I got the motivation. You see so many people nowadays that are making these videos talking about like what people should and shouldn't do, you know, and this is something I see everywhere, is like this idea of like chosen ones, and I'm still not completely on board with it. And this hence why I labeled this initial topic as real ones, because I think that's much more of an accurate and ubiquitous term. I think trying to distinguish yourself as somebody that's chosen is a little bit silly, because you can lose a lot of your value in labeling yourself a certain way and trying to set yourself apart. Because if you are real, that happens naturally. You don't even have to identify yourself with a certain group. But people do. And it's hard to say who really fits the bill. Maybe it's an expansive definition. A lot of people think that they're something, and I don't know if it's really my place to say if they're not or if they are, but what you can do is break down, like I said, the actions, the body language, the intuition, all those things, to really gauge, what do you think this person is going to do? What do you think they actually want? If you're talking to somebody who is giving life advice through Instagram, but every piece of life advice is attached to some sort of selfie or attached to some sort of mental health video, that actually seems more promotional by nature than reflectional or introspective. That's a problem, because these things aren't harmonious. When you have something that is kind of counteracting the supposed intent of the initial idea or product, there's kind of an issue, there's a conflict. Why do people feel such a need to share these things on social media if all they're really after is, awareness and raising people's vibrations and all this stuff, So these are just questions I ask myself, and I don't think that I'm the most alert and aware person ever, but I definitely feel that I see through a lot of the BS of these really awoke people on YouTube, and I am not saying that just out of somebody's, lack of success, because you could argue easily that I haven't experienced, big wave of viewership or kind of consumption of my content. But I actually appreciate that, because I think it's helped me to stay more humble and realize that, a lot of people just don't align with what I'm talking about, and it's not trendy. I'm not talking about chosen ones, and I'm not talking about, exclusively semen retention and these are the hot topics nowadays. And I think just because you talk about those things doesn't mean you're not real, but it also doesn't mean you're chosen, so to speak. So this is just something to keep in mind. And, I think if you resonate with this topic, then you probably have also kind of, picked up on a little bit of that inconsistency in the YouTube space. There's a lot of people that are in it for probably very selfish reasons. They're not really so much passionate about the content and what they're creating as much as they are the real life material consequences that could arise because of it, if that makes sense. And I feel like I see that a lot. So in some ways I'm kind of over it, and that's why I'm making a video like this. But I just think it's a fascinating topic and deserves some time to be explored. So anyway, if you resonate with this topic, if you like the subject, if you like my videos, then feel free to subscribe, and you can definitely like the video. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one, and hope everything's well, and until next time, so peace.